What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, November 29th, 2016. Getting into the week here, almost to the end of the month, the start of December and the holiday shopping season. We have got lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, getting on to this three-ring circus about the recounts, Wisconsin is going to start their presidential recount on Thursday. And Jill Stein is already suing over their decision to not mandate a hand recount. Just going to tangle this all up in court, and of course, we're basically 3 weeks away from the Electoral College. So I don't know what the game plan here is, because Jill has missed the filing deadline for Pennsylvania, wasn't likely to get a recount there anyway without proving election fraud. So it's kind of hard to say what exactly is the agenda going on here, but rather surprisingly, Reform Party candidate Roque de la Fuente has signed on as well and sent a petition to Wisconsin. So this is definitely an orchestrated campaign to try and either discredit Trump or derail the Electoral College or just suck more money out of their sponsors. But it almost seems like there doesn't seem to be a point. Neither of these two candidates can win the presidency. The only one who benefits from this is Hillary Clinton. Now, Michigan's already done a recount by hand, mandated under state law because of the closeness of their election results, but they've declared Trump the winner. Pennsylvania is out of play. It doesn't matter what happens in Wisconsin. It's not going to change the outcome of the election one tiny bit. Now, we're hearing, according to an article that came out of the Gateway Pundit, insiders inside the election system in Wisconsin are saying that Hillary is running a huge risk here because a hand recount might expose massive fraud by the Democrats in Wisconsin. And so they're really trying to roll the dice here on this one. Now, the White House has now officially rejected Donald Trump's claim that there were millions of illegal votes cast in this election. How can they know? I mean, just think about it for a split second here. How can they possibly know? Because of all the states that overturned their voter ID laws. There is absolutely no foundation for the White House to come on out and say that they know for certain no illegal immigrants voted in these elections. It's a completely baseless claim. And it stands up against the analysis of voter registration records done by votefraud.org and a similar study done by truethevote.org that said there were, in fact, millions of non-citizens voting in this election. And so they're still out there trying to claim that Hillary won the popular vote, which is true only if you count the illegals and the dead and the out-of-state voters and so forth. And that's something else supposedly that might be exposed by Wisconsin, is people voting multiple times and out of state, and apparently nursing home abuse, because one of the things vote riggers like to do is they'll go into a nursing home full of people who don't even remember their own name, fill out voter registration cards for them, get the ballots, fill out the ballots in their name, and send them in. Now, the Green Party itself has now basically rejected Jill Stein, saying she doesn't represent the Green Party anymore with this stunt. They don't support this push for a recount. And a lot of people are pointing out that Jill Stein's demand for a recount is only serving to divide the country even more. Maybe that's the goal. Still pushing for a Soros color revolution. We found a video from the debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. We put it up on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. And the question being posed in this video clip is, will you support the outcome of the election? And at the 20-second mark, Hillary Clinton says she will. Of course, that was back when she was convinced she was going to steal it. Now then, Huma Abedin's younger sister is at the forefront of spreading this fake claim that Hillary Clinton could still win if enough people call the Justice Department and demand an audit of the 2016 election. And change.org, who I've now told them don't send me any more emails, is out there with a petition saying exactly the same thing, and we've got 500,000 people who've signed this thing to demand a full audit. The Department of Justice has already come on out and said this is nonsense. There's no basis in law for this. And no, the Department of Justice is not considering an audit of the election. So why are they still going through all these moves? Well, it's really very simple if you think about it. Hillary and her circle of corruption are all looking at serious jail time under President Trump. And they're in a panic. And that's why they're doing such reckless, desperate, and stupid stunts trying to reverse the election. Remember when the New York Times came out with that story, Donald Trump will not criminally investigate Hillary Clinton, and everybody said, oh, well, he's broken his campaign promise. We all supported him because we want Hillary in prison. And then it turned out the New York Times reporters had misquoted Donald Trump. He didn't say that at all. So the entire establishment is still at war with Donald Trump and all of his supporters. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. As usual, at the top of the show, we're talking about politics. But to get back to the situation, why are Hillary and all of her people still doing all these desperate things? Because they understand they're looking at jail time. Worse, the Clintons themselves are looking at a major problem because the IRS is investigating the Clinton Foundation as to whether it really is a 501c3. And I can tell you right now, they're going to conclude it isn't. Because under the rules of a 501c3, the majority of the money that you take in must be spent on your charitable projects. And we know the Clinton Foundation didn't even come close to that. And if the IRS concludes that the Clinton Foundation is not a 501c3, the resulting tax bill is going to turn Bill and Hillary Clinton back into poor people, which is, in my mind, the absolute greatest possible punishment for money junkies. Make them poor again. Let them go into withdrawal. Roll around on the ground, cold sweats and shakes and everything. Now, one of Hillary's biggest supporters, and again we're going back to the New York Times, columnist and Nobel Prize winner, which again tells you how worthless the Nobel Prize is, Paul Krugman is out there claiming that FBI Director James Comey and Russian President Vladimir Putin worked together to install Donald Trump. They're in cahoots. Apparently, anybody that doesn't like Hillary Clinton is now designated an official Russian stooge. So I guess we all need T-shirts saying Russian stooge and proud of it. Now, the Washington Post is continuing their war on the independent media. They suffered a bit of a black eye over citing that prop or not website to list all the websites that are Russian propaganda outlets, of which my site is on the list. I'm very, very proud. I made the varsity team here. And they went on the warpath today against specifically Alex Jones and InfoWars. And as expected, they went on out there on this Pizzagate nonsense, saying, how could you trust Alex Jones and InfoWars with this ridiculous story about ping-pong paddles and so forth and so on? And I told you that Pizzagate was looking like a poison-the-well piece of propaganda for the corporate media to use to attack the independent media. And I did try and warn Alex. He was on thin ice on this one, but he went with it, and now they're using it against him. The Washington Post is further out there whining and crying that Donald Trump has weaponized conspiracy theories. Apparently the phrase conspiracy theory has lost its cachet of negativity, so now it's weaponized conspiracy theories. He's using weapons of conspiracy theories. No, we're telling the truth, and that is the problem, and that's why the corporate media is on the defensive. They understand their entire business model is lying to the public. That's what they're paid those millions of dollars for. Nobody's going to pay them those huge, fat salaries to tell you the truth. Plenty of people out there willing to tell you the truth for, well, minimum wage, or even less, as we do. They're paid those $1 million salaries. They're given the money for those fancy studios and the lights and all of the rest of it in order to control your mind by controlling what you know, and now it isn't working any longer. And they're in a panic. They can't change their business model. They can't start reporting on the truth. The money will dry up. And so they're crying like little babies and out there saying, oh, it's weaponized conspiracy theories. It's fake news. You have to come back and believe the most holy revealed dogma of ABC, CNN, CBS, NBC, Fox. And they're definitely in thrash mode here. Now, there's an article in Russia Insider that came on out basically castigating the Washington Post for relying on this one blog that was started last summer, and nobody knows who actually runs it because it's registered through a private registration company. And they simply put up a list of websites, and the Washington Post quotes that as holy gospel that these are all sites that are working in cahoots with Vladimir Putin. And this article concludes saying, well, there might be some merit to that because only the sinister Russians could make one of America's most cherished newspapers look so silly. And they're absolutely right. They're in a panic over there. Now, story coming out of Blacklisted News, the corporate media's gulag of the mind. And that's really where we've all been living. I think it's the reason for the success of the Matrix movie franchise. I think people understood at some level that it was a metaphor for the world we live in, where we are just encased in constant lies about the reality of our lives in order to keep us under control, to turn us into batteries. I think the same thing is behind the huge success of HBO's Westworld, and I'll admit it, I'm a fan, I'm hooked. Because we're seeing in those evolving hosts much of the same, shall I call it, the transit of consciousness and awareness that the American people themselves are now going through. So, the gates to the gulag are falling down, and everybody is streaming for freedom. Even Sean Hannity is out there saying it's time to accept the new paradigm. People don't need the corporate media anymore. They don't have to be dependent on the corporate media anymore. The media landscape has shifted to the independent media, to Breitbart, to Drudge, to Republic Broadcasting Network, to WhatReallyHappened.com, to Alex Jones and InfoWars. That's the new reality. We've democratized the flow of information in our society. Ron Paul, and his website was also on that Washington Post hit list, is out there saying the fake news is coming from the government. And that's the whole point. Nobody likes a liar. So, over at Investment Watch blog, they had an interesting article pointing out that the corporate media's attack on the independent media is the digital version of the Nazi book burnings. Remember those big Nazi book burnings? Anything that questioned the Nazi regime, they piled it up and set it on fire and they danced around and went Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. That's what's going on right now. The Washington Post is leading a modern Nazi book burning against the independent media. And we all know that's exactly what they're doing. Do they have any shame about it? Of course not. Neither did the Nazis. Now, getting on over to the Donald Trump campaign, he has now confirmed his choice of Tom Price for Health and Human Services Secretary and Seema Verma as Administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. This is already causing an uproar because Tom Price is a critic of Obamacare, does not think it's working. I think anybody with two brain cells to rub together understands Obamacare is a complete and utter failure. It failed in its overt purpose to make health care more affordable to the American people. It failed in its covert purpose of generating new tax revenues for a desperately broke and hopelessly in debt government. It is a failure. It's a complete failure. Right now, the United States has the most expensive health care on earth by a huge margin. And we rank 37th in terms of health care quality. And the overall health of the American people is considered poor. Because you can't make money off of healthy people. Now, Donald Trump has just announced something I am adamantly opposed to. He apparently is launching a thank you tour for voters across the nation before he takes office. I went over to his website and looked at the dates. He's starting on the 1st of December in Ohio, and he's going to be touring several states. He's not coming out here to Hawaii. I think this is the stupidest thing he could be doing right now, going out and having a public rally when there are so many people who want him dead before that electoral college can get together. I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know what his security people are thinking. And all I can say, Donald, is I hope you're wearing your Kevlar Armani, because I think you're taking a terrible and wholly unnecessary risk. The time for the thank you tour would be after the electoral college has voted you in as president, because then if you're assassinated, Mike Pence becomes the president and Hillary is still left out in the cold. I think it was a very, very poor decision that you made there. Now, Donald Trump has come out on the issue of the burning of the American flag, and he's already being attacked by it because the Supreme Court, 2 U.S. Supreme Court rulings, say that burning the American flag is a protected form of free speech under the First Amendment. I tend to side with the Supreme Court on this. I've never burned an American flag myself, but I do have one of those Obama flags. Remember those came out where it's the red and white stripes and where the stars would go was a picture of Obama. I wonder if it'd be okay with Donald Trump if I burned that one, because I'm about ready to. And by the way, that flag was a violation of U.S. law when Obama did it, which is why after they put them up and everybody said, "Are you out of your mind?" and they took them down. Now you can buy them for pennies out on eBay. So let's turn to the war zones, because there is a lot going on right now that we need to be paying attention. Right now, Bashar al-Assad is on the verge of victory, the biggest victory since the start of the U.S. attempt to oust him 5 years ago. They're on the verge of the complete capture of Aleppo. They freed the eastern part of the city. The water supply is back under Syrian government control. 80,000 civilians have now been liberated. And they're rushing to the arms of the Syrian soldiers and hugging them and thanking them. And it's a tremendous victory. And it's left the U.S. government and the corporate media in a bit of a jam, because they've been telling us all along about how, oh, the Syrian people hated the Syrian government. They hated Bashar al-Assad. They were just waiting for those U.S.-backed terrorists to come on in and save them. And here we have the Syrian people, by the tens of thousands, running up and expressing their gratitude to have been freed from those U.S.-backed terrorists. Now, the U.S. government was using those human shields, the civilians still in Aleppo, to argue against Syria and Russian efforts to retake the city. With the civilians now released, Russia and Syria can really uncork on those remaining U.S.-backed forces. And probably because of that, we're starting to see a major escalation in the number of these U.S.-backed terrorists who are surrendering. 500 have surrendered in the last 24 hours alone, just laying down their weapons, saying, okay, this is all part of Syria now, signing on to the amnesty agreement. It's all coming apart here. And the U.S. is getting desperate. Now remember, again, go back to the official lie you were told. The U.S. was in Syria to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda, right? And now Russia and Syria have pretty much driven ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the U.S.-backed rebels out of the country. So what does the U.S. and the West do? Do they celebrate? Have we had a victory? No. They're going to throw more sanctions onto Syria and Russia for taking Aleppo back, which tells you that this nonsense, we're only in Syria to get the terrorists, was a big fat load of USDA choice bovine excrement. More about Syria when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And from Russia Insider, there's a very tongue-in-cheek headline they have there. BBC on suicide watch after Aleppo civilians seek the safety of the Syrian army. Because the narrative for the last 5 years has been the Syrian people hate Assad, even though they kept re-electing him. The Syrian people want to be saved from the evil Bashar al-Assad. Syrian people loved the U.S.-backed terrorists, even when they were gassing them and starving them and denying them water to keep them under control. And now the facts on the ground are once again reminding us the corporate media is just full of bovine excrement, and everybody's trying to scramble. How are they going to deal with this latest huge embarrassment? Well, things are definitely escalating. As we mentioned before, Congress is trying to sneak through this legislation for a no-fly zone over Syria. They have absolutely no legal grounds to declare a no-fly zone over Syria. We're not technically at war with Syria. We were supposedly there as an intervention against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but the Russians and the Syrians have kicked them out pretty much. There's no justification for this other than to go on in and just take over Syria. We'll have Obama stand up and say, all right, yeah, we lied to you. Okay, what are you going to do about it, huh? What are you going to do about the fact that we lied you into another war? You won't do anything about it. I seem to recall Charles I said something similar. So did Louis XVI. So did Mussolini. So did Ceausescu. Little wander through history there. But Congress is out there trying to declare the no-fly zone. What Syria needs to do right now is go to the UN Security Council, and even though we know the U.S. will veto it, just go on in and get some kind of a declaration or resolution saying the United States has no business being in Syria right now. Because if the U.S. arbitrarily, unilaterally declares a no-fly zone over Syria, it will lead to conflict between American and Russian aircraft, and that will be the start of World War III. And I told you, when Donald Trump won that election, the war hawks were going to try and get that hot war with Russia going before he could take office and pull the plug. And even so, Donald Trump may fool them. He's a businessman. He's not a career politician. He's not obsessed with his historical legacy the way professional politicians are. They go to sleep at night dreaming of statues, holding up pigeons in the future and their face on the currency or at least a postage stamp. Trump could get into office and call up Putin and the head of China and say, you know, this is nonsense, let's stop. Putin's already said, yeah, this is silly. Why should we do this? But that's what Congress is trying to do. Trying to get a no-fly zone in order to create a situation leading to direct conflict between U.S. and Russian forces. And they have absolutely no justification for it under any international law. This is just the U.S. saying, me superpower, me go where I want, send in carriers and planes and you can do nothing. Sounds like famous last words. The European Union has issued a demand to Greece that they should deny Russian supply ships and fuel tankers from transiting Greece's territorial waters on their way to Syria, make them sail around the long way. Greece has told the EU, mind your own business. They have good relations with the Russians. They're not about to throw that all away just because the EU wants to throw a tantrum. This globalist thing is falling apart. I imagine Soros is in a panic right now. Look how much of his fortune he's put into this. I'm half expecting him to knock at the Clintons' home in Chappaqua and say, can I get a refund? Now, the wild card in all of this is Erdogan, because Turkey has, for all intents and purposes, invaded Syria. And they're claiming it is in response to efforts to wrest part of Turkey and Syria and Iraq and form a new independent Kurdistan, which we know was part of the U.S. agenda in the region. But Erdogan is saying it's all Bashar al-Assad's fault and we're going on in. And this could lead to conflict between Turkey and Russia, at which point the U.S. would become Turkey's friend again overnight. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And while the American corporate media is obsessing about the Ohio knife attack and whether or not Mitt Romney has a chance of being Secretary of State, the real hot news item is the fact that Turkey has launched a military operation into Syria, and Erdogan actually came out and said it's to end the rule of Bashar al-Assad. Now, does Turkey really think all by itself it can stand up to Syria and Russia? No, of course not. This is a desperate Hail Mary pass to try and get Assad out using a proxy, the way the U.S. is using Saudi Arabia in Yemen. And Erdogan does not seem to understand it's not going to go well for him, just like it has not gone well for Saudi Arabia. But they're absolutely desperate. Obama wanted a victory in Syria to go on his legacy, to be remembered in the history books, and instead he's on the verge of the biggest U.S. defeat since Vietnam. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab some phone calls. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike.
Yes.
I was listening to Fox News on my way home. They're like yelling, you complaining, oh, what's happening in Syria is terrible, and kind of blaming Assad for it. I don't know what's going to happen. You know, I think we got madmen in charge of this country, and that's why I believe, by the way, that's what another reason I believe is Pizzagate, because usually elitists are usually madmen and tend to be child molesters, as you could see in Britain and what happened before in the 1980s.
Okay, hang on. We've got two separate issues we're dealing with here. Yeah, we have people in positions of authority who seem very mentally unstable, whether it's just in innate megalomania or they're taking way too many prescription antidepressants. I'm not really sure. Yes, there is pedophilia in high places. It pervades the church. The British are dealing with their scandals within their own government and the BBC. Yes, we had the Franklin scandal here. But this specific story, Pizzagate, was set up from the beginning to be easy to discredit, and it was a poison the well PR hoax to discredit the independent media. Because right now the government and the corporate media and all these politicians and Hillary's campaign, they're in a panic. They have lost control of the minds of the American people. And like I said before, they can't change the business model. They can't start telling you the truth. So all they can do is try and find ways to attack and destroy the credibility of the independent media. And at this point, the more they try and do it, the more ridiculous and impotent they look. So getting on back to Syria, yeah, they're pursuing a course of action that borders on the absolute insane. Part of it is wrapped up in ego. We're the greatest nation on earth. If we're going to conquer Syria, by goodness, will be conquered. The other part of it is that the U.S. government has literally bet the farm on this project to grab all the resource-rich areas of the world and shackle them to the U.S. dollar. General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this back in, I think it was 2005. And said the ultimate aim was to conquer all these oil-rich nations in the Middle East and make sure they were selling their oil only for the U.S. dollar in order to keep up international demand for the dollar and allow it to maintain its position of hegemonic domination of the world economy. That agenda is failing, but they've gone so far, they can't call it off. If they quit and turn around, the U.S. economy is going to implode the next day, and that's why they're still pushing into Syria, even at the risk of a nuclear war with Russia.
I think that what President Trump has to do, President-elect Trump, right, is he has to make an announcement. He has to let Turks know, first of all, you fools get yourself into a war with Russia. We will not back you up. You're on your own.
Well, I don't think it's not going to be up to Trump. It's not going to be up to Trump. It's Obama who's going to commit us to being on Turkey's side in this war with Russia. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get this thing really cranked up and past the point of no return before Donald Trump actually has the authority to make any of these deals.
Well, there might not even be a United States then by the time he he's ready, because there might not be in Russia or any other country left anymore if that happens. I mean, that's why I say these people are out and out madmen. I mean, even in the Cold War, they didn't dare do stuff. Thank God, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, you had two level-headed men facing each other in Kennedy and Khrushchev. Now, these people today are madmen. One of the things with Kennedy and Khrushchev, both of them knew and understood war. Both of them were in World War II.
Yes.
Both understood just bloody and horrible war was, and understood what a nuclear exchange would be, even back in 1961. So you could have just imagined, with the kind of bombs they have today, we're talking total obliteration. Don't these madmen understand that? Don't they understand what they're doing?
No, they got their bunkers already built. They've reactivated the Greenbrier. They've got Mount Weather. Looks like they've brought Cheyenne Mountain back into business. They're all set. If they make a mistake, they're going to go, oh, well, and they'll go underground for a year or so and then come on up and it'll be big and roomy and all those useless eaters will be gone.
Well, what they don't understand is like Matt Bracken. I don't know if you know who Matt Bracken is. He was in InfoWars the other day, and he said, and he knows, he's a former Navy SEAL, so he knows a lot of the special ops and the Blackwater people and stuff. Those people, the minute that it hits the fan like that, they're going to say, oh, no, those are our bunkers now. They're not going to let these elitists in. They're probably going to just turn their guns on them and kill them because they hate these people anyway. They hate these elitists.
Well, that would be an interesting scenario.
So, I mean, Bracken was almost sure of it. I mean, he was sure of it. And like I said, he knows a lot of these people, plus special ops, former special ops working for contractors like Blackwater and all.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what these people think they're doing. I mean, what gives the United States the right to tell other countries you have to have a regime change? And what's the deal with Turkey? See, Turkey is two-faced. And I think Putin's made a mistake with Turkey. He thought he could deal with them. He's wrong. He can't deal with them. They've been a sleazy, slimy country from probably since...
let's be accurate here. Let's be accurate here. Their politicians have been sleazy and slimy, but Turkey is hardly alone in that regard. Ordinary people tend to be pretty decent on the average, whether they're Turks or Greeks or Syrians or Americans or whatever. It is the politicians who get off on these power trips and love to start these wars, it is a very unstable situation. Right now, the future of planet Earth is in the hands of whichever world leader is the least mentally stable, and certainly Erdogan is way up high on that list. Obama's not too far behind. We have all these war hawks in this country who think war is really cool, like John McCain. He doesn't have to worry about going. None of his family are going to go. And we had this guy in Great Britain is out there saying, we got to be tough with the Russians. Well, I don't see him getting on a transport plane for the front lines.
Didn't they do enough damage with Iraq? Wasn't it bad enough, the weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist? Now they want to start with Syria, and with Iraq, you didn't have Russia standing in the way.
Remember, the real agenda here is twofold. It's U.S. control of all the world's resource-rich areas in order that those resources be traded only for the U.S. dollar, to keep the dollar as the world's global trade and banking currency. And the other one is, of course, is to destroy the threat posed by the ruble and the yuan against that U.S. dollar. That's what's driving this war. It's all about that ink and paper stuff.
Don't they understand it's not going to happen anymore? I mean, Russia is back to where it was. It's a superpower.
Yes.
You're not going to just, even if they were bad guys, they're not bad guys. They're good. I think they're the good guys right now. But even if they were, the old Soviet Union, you're not going to bully these people around. I don't know how many people ever watch some of these World War II things on the History Channel or the American Hero Channel, where you see what Operation Barbarossa and the beating the Russians took in the beginning and how they came roaring.
They're tough. They're tough. I mean, you look at stopping the Nazis' march on to Moscow. They're tough. There's just no question about it. And, what are we going to march into Europe and Russia with? All of these buttercups and snowflakes that are out there with their dyed hair and saying, oh, words hurt me. Words hurt me. Here's your rifle, kid. Oh, I hate guns. I've never touched a gun. Guns are evil. I can't do that. And we're going to launch a world war with an army made up of that? Are you kidding me?
And they worship even though they're no longer communists, they still worship those World War II vets. I mean,
they should. They should, just as we should remember our veterans and what they died for, or what they thought they were dying for.
80% of the division, the German divisions, including the elite division, were in the Eastern Front fighting the Russians.
Yes.
The Russians rolled over them.
Yes.
So, people got to understand, this is no country to play with. And now they're fully patriotic. They don't have communism anymore. They're very proud to be Russians. And they got a leader that they respect, that they look up to. And it's not trying to start a war. He's actually a statesman. I think the world's greatest statesman today.
My understanding is, Time Magazine is running their online poll to nominate Man of the Year, and Putin's leading.
I can understand why. Yes, absolutely.
All right, well, listen, I'm sorry to cut you off. We got a switchboard full of phone calls here, and I need to get some of them out of the way so that I can get back to the news here. We're going to switch briefly to John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I see that your armed forces, the Air Force and Navy and what have you, are complaining that they can't recruit enough pilots. There's a pilot shortage. Well, I've got news for them. These people are being sensible. They don't want to commit suicide by S-300, S-400, and S-500.
Well, I think it's a little more subtle than that. Remember what Sun Tzu said about launching a war. You've got to have a fighting force that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will fight fiercely and, if necessary, die in the war. You need a civilian population who believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will bear the hardship war brings even to the victorious side. And what we've got here is a nation which understands all of these wars we've seen for the last going on 20 years were all about greed and the money junkies. And these young people don't want to do that. Even if they have this idea that they're the world's greatest pilot and they're going to whip the crew down at Top Gun and become aces and come home decorated medals, it's still not a comfortable thing when you know what you're doing is inherently morally wrong. And that's why they're not getting people to sign up. Plus, you know, a lot of people are probably saying, you know, the F-22 is asphyxiating its pilots, the F-35 explodes on the runway. You know, I could be killed before I even get to actually see the enemy. And that's probably working against them as well.
Well, I agree with certain aspects. I mean, looking at the crowds on Black Friday and the universities with all these snowflakes, are you seriously going to fight a war with the obese crowds that we saw in Target and Walmart, and these young kids with purple hair and crying because Hillary lost? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. They're going to, you know, hit the beach and stand up and say, "Oh, I got a splinter. You know, can we pause the war? I got a splinter. I need a Band-Aid. Thank you. I need to go and cry in my safe space."
Well, I think there is a safe space, and it's between here and the moon. I think that's where we need to put them all.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. You know, if they can send one man to the moon, why can't we send all of these, you know, buttercups and snowflakes? But, you know, they're talking about colonizing Mars. I think that's the perfect place to send all these people. It's a safe space. You go to Mars. You spend your entire life in a spacesuit. You're never going to hear a bad word. Perfect solution for everybody.
Yep, absolutely spot on, Michael. I agree entirely.
All right, well, listen.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Tony in New York. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Love your show. I'm lost on the weekends without it. I just want to bring up a couple points for talking about that Pizzagate or whatever. Did you guys ever talk about how many Pentagon computers were found to have child porn on them? It's like 5,000. Makes up a quarter of the
it's a problem. It's a problem. You know, and it's not just child porn. I mean, when they were trying to figure out what happened back in 2008, they discovered that over at the Securities Exchange Commission, which is supposed to be keeping an eye on this stuff, they were just sitting around all day looking at online porn on their taxpayer-funded computers. Same thing at the Minerals Management Service when they were trying to figure out how it was the Deepwater Horizon disaster got as bad as it did. Yeah, you know, the problem right now, and Trump is getting ready to address this, once you have a job in the federal government, it's almost impossible to get fired. And it's a very long, involved process of appeal and arbitration and the rest of it. And as a result, the federal government has accumulated a large population of people who are just coasting along, getting their fatter than the private sector paychecks and just figuring they can do whatever they want. And it really is a scandal. And I think Trump has already said he's going to streamline the process by which non-performing federal government employees can be pink-slipped. And I'm fully on board with that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with people watching porn if they have to do it at work, but child...
Well, yeah, I agree with you on the child porn here. As far as porn is concerned, that's what your home computer is for. When you are at work, you do what you're paid to do. I actually discourage people from reading my website and listening to my radio show at work. That's just not a fair deal with your employer. Go home, catch the podcast, use your home computer. But I agree with you on the child porn situation, and I'm still unable to get my mind completely around why this is the problem that it is. And I guess it's a failing on my part that I can't comprehend why this is going on, whether it's the church, whether it's the people in the Franklin scandal, Jimmy Savile, and all the rest of it. I just absolutely cannot understand what it is that drives this thing forward here. But again, my view of Pizzagate, that was a setup. That was set up to lure people in with all these very dramatic images and everything to get people to overcommit to the story so it could be discredited, and then the independent media discredited with it, which is what they just pulled on Alex Jones.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you could understand the child porn problem, you would be a weirdo too. And the fact that you don't understand it makes me fine with me. So another thing I want to tell you, I was listening to that blowhard John Bolton on Fox News by accident, and he was talking about the Beirut bombings and overthrowing the regime in Iran, of course. So, I decided to look up and do what I normally do when I want to find the truth. I put in Michael Rivero, What Really Happened, WRH, and then the search that I want to find out about. Mm-hmm. So I do the Google search for the Beirut bombing. I type in Rivero, WRH, Beirut bombing, Lebanon, and nothing comes up from what really happened. Nothing.
Okay, well, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. I didn't write a lot about the Beirut bombing because it actually came and went. And the way Google works is you will put a search term, then you will type site, S-I-T-E, and then the website. And that confines the Google search to that site only. And I don't have a lot about the Beirut bombing, other than the fact that Israel knew it was going to happen ahead of time, and the U.S. basically invaded Grenada to distract people from it. We got to take a break for commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go back to the phones. Philip in Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Philip, are you there?
Hello, Michael. Yes, sir. Two things. One about the situation with Turkey, and the other about President-elect Trump's popular vote success as well. Why do you think, since Turkey seems to have pivoted to Russia after their failed coup attempt, I guess, by the U.S., why do you think Putin's not reining him in a little bit with regards to Syria?
Well, he's trying to. He's trying to right now. In fact, they're trying to slap him down and saying this is a very reckless thing. Now, Turkey's pivot toward Russia and China was less about the coup d'etat attempt than it is that Turkey has been looking at the European Union and has just decided it's not in his best interest to get tangled up with that disaster in the making. So I don't think that Erdogan launched on this war into Syria all on his own. I think somehow a deal was made behind the scenes where he's been promised a lot of money or other concessions. I know that Erdogan right now is threatening about opening Turkey's border and letting those millions and millions of refugees that have been camped out in Turkey stream towards Europe. And Europe's already talking about putting up their wall to deal with that. It's a volatile situation. But I think Erdogan had some kind of an inducement to take this very dramatic step of openly declaring that he's out to get Assad. Up until now, all of Turkey's military operations into Syria were in the context of rebellious Kurds that were causing trouble. Now he's basically shifting and saying, we're going to Damascus.
Yeah, I mean, it's just mixed signals, definitely, for sure, and it is a mess. Now, on to the fake news that's out here trying to deny Mr. Trump's success with the popular vote as well. The collective gaslighting by the gatekeepers, the real fake media. When you point out several instances about his success with the popular vote, they just they don't want to accept it. You mentioned votefraud.org and Truth the Vote. WhatReallyHappened.com, as well as Mr. Obama, before the election, encouraging illegal aliens to get involved and go and cast votes. Oh, these people are in such denial that.
Well, see, what it is, their claim that Hillary won the popular vote is their foundation in their drive to overturn the Electoral College. If Trump won the popular vote as well as the Electoral College, they don't have any place that they can come from to try and overturn the Electoral College. Ignoring, of course, the fact that had this been a popular vote election, Donald Trump would have run his campaign differently. He would have focused on Florida, New York, Texas, and California, and he would have won the popular vote that way. But the fact of the matter is Trump won by the rules everybody agreed to play by, and now that Hillary's people have lost, they want to change the rules. Anyway, Philip, I got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Going to take a couple more calls, then we got to get back to the news here because we got a lot of stuff to share with you today. Tammy in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
I was wanting to call. This is the first time calling, so I'm nervous. But I wanted to talk about Congressman Tom Price, who Donald Trump is considering for HHS Secretary, Health and Human Services.
He's not considering. He just named him. All that's needed now is confirmation by the Congress.
And I really hope and pray that people will push back against this guy. This guy is the antithesis of health freedom. In our state, when he was a state senator, he sponsored and passed a bill. It was Senate Bill 385 in 2002. It was the Emergency Health Powers Act. And at the time, the CDC was pushing for all the states to pass the bill and or pass that type of legislation. And Georgia was one of the few that did. And the thing is just horrible. It mandates forced medical treatment if the governor declares an emergency health issue, and it doesn't even have to be a real emergency. It could just be perceived, say, like Zika or something, and then they could force people to take vaccines.
Okay, well, I can understand your concerns here, but I think the major concern about Tom Price is that he's very much opposed to Obamacare, which we know is a major nationwide disaster. It stretches far beyond Georgia. And so at this point, there's nobody in Washington, D.C. that is going to be pleasing to all the various parties. But we know that the health insurance companies are going to be opposed to Tom Price because they're making money off of Obamacare. We just put up an article at WhatReallyHappened.com. The IRS is now going to be targeting Americans who don't have those Obamacare policies, which are hugely expensive and utterly worthless. And I think if Tom Price is going to come down on the side of seriously reforming or removing Obamacare, then we need to basically put that uppermost in our considerations. The reality is that if there is a medical emergency, forced medical treatment, may be warranted. For example, if Ebola comes on now, you have to take dramatic steps for that. Now, as far as Zika and the vaccines are concerned, Price may have been working on the best information he had available because, as I understand it, back in 2002 was before it was revealed that the CDC's report saying that vaccines were safe was a fraud. And so Price was probably making a decision on the basis of what he thought was reliable and accurate information at that point.
Well, at that time it was smallpox. It's whatever disease they want to make up at the time. We have the CDC, and I agree with you, by the way, on Obamacare. But I think there's got to be someone else that opposes Obamacare and could get something in there that's good and leave him in Congress to work to get it passed in Congress. Because the other thing is we have the CDC right now that's trying to pass the same kind of rule. It was a proposed rule. I saw John Rappaport had written about it, saying basically the same thing as this law.
Well, I understand. Well, the CDC and Big Pharma are pushing for mandated vaccines for the entire population for our entire lifespan because it's a huge, huge moneymaker. But I think if it does turn out that Donald Trump's son is autistic, and Rosie O'Donnell just came on out and acknowledged one of her children is autistic. We know one of Robert De Niro's children has come down autistic. That's a lot of political power and star power that's finally going to start, taking a look at where all of these illnesses, especially the autoimmune illnesses, are coming from. And I think with Tom Price working in the Trump administration, we might actually see a pushback against this corporate medicine, which profits by making us ill and making us sick, like I said earlier in the show. Anyway, Tammy, going to let you go. Going to move to another phone call. Donna in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks, Mike. I'm scared to death, but I'll do my best. I'd like to hear words of comfort from you on two things, if you have time. The first is the problem of illegals, and I'm very, very angry over the damage being done by illegals to our country. But here's my problem. Friends of ours down there, when they had land and they had a store, they were not needy people at all. When the drug cartel came to take over their town, two of the people they killed were his brother and his son. He and his wife fled up here without even taking time to grab the family pictures, and now they are terrified that they're going to be forced back and finally killed because they won't help out the drug people. Speak to me words of comfort.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not really big on the words of comfort thing. These people that you're talking about, are they legal American citizens?
No, they ran from the people who killed his brother and his son, and they left immediately, and there was not time to, and they don't speak English, and I don't even know if they have knowledge about how to get papers.
Well,
no, they're not legal. That's the problem.
What country are they from originally?
Mexico.
Okay. Well,
Mexico.
There are places they could live in Mexico anonymously. If they're no longer a threat to the drug cartel, they're going to be left alone. Now, if you want a word of comfort, it is this. The outcome of the 2016 election is that the Bush-Clinton narcocracy has been ripped out of power. And for the last 30 years, we've had a country that claims to have a war on drugs, while some of our top politicians and intelligence agencies have been profiting from that drug trade. We know that the war on drugs is really the war on the competition's drugs. We know that one of the reasons the border with Mexico is being kept wide open is to facilitate that drug trade. We know that one of the reasons Afghanistan was invaded was to restore the opium flow from Afghanistan after the Taliban shut it down. We have had, for the last 3 decades in this country, going back to the 1980s and maybe even before that, we have had a top political elite that is itself steeped in drug money corruption. And over the next 4 years, we're going to have an opportunity to start pulling that apart, and that is going to weaken the reach of those drug cartels. It's certainly going to cut off the flow of American weapons through Fast and Furious. If your friends are in fact fleeing from the drug cartels, then I would think they would qualify for asylum status. And I would say the best thing that you can do for them is to get them an immigration lawyer, get them in touch with the DEA, and try and work out some kind of a deal, okay?
Thank you. Do you have time for the other subject?
Real quick.
I want you to know first how I only have time for one thing, how much I appreciate your work and the fact that you're able to say these things off the top of your head. The other thing is Israel. We've heard how much damage Israel is doing to Palestine and so forth, and I love Trump. But he is speaking up for Israel and says they're our best friend. I need words of comfort on that.
Well, Donald Trump, during his campaign, was playing politics, and he was saying what he thought Israel supporters wanted to hear. But in reading Israel's media, it was very clear they preferred Hillary Clinton because Hillary was going to do whatever Israel wanted. Donald Trump is going to look at every request coming in from Israel on a case-by-case basis and make his decisions at the time. And I think ultimately he's going to realize that Israel does, in fact, have too much control over this country, that they are behaving very badly, that they are committing war crimes. He may come on board with the plan to continue to recognize Palestine as its own sovereign, independent nation. So all I can say is time is going to solve that mystery. He's done with the campaign. He's getting his team together. We're not really going to know what his policy about Israel and Palestine is until after January 20th.
Thanks again, Mike. I really appreciate your work.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Alex in Florida. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I just wanted to start this conversation just by letting everyone know, which I know you already know, we need to really buckle down on the centralized bank. We need to get rid of that. That's the main thing that's causing all the problems, is that our money system is privatized.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The good news there is Bolivia just kicked out their Rothschild bank. So I'm sure tomorrow Obama's going to tell us that Bolivia is a hotbed of ISIS terrorism and the invasion is on. But we're beginning to see that 300-year-old scam of private central banking, it's starting to fray at the edges. And more people understand that the Federal Reserve does not serve the American people. It does not serve the United States of America. It serves only itself. And they're very open about saying that. They're in business to make money off the American people. Whether Donald Trump is going to take them on or not remains to be seen, because if he understands history as I do, he understands anybody who goes up against those private central bankers risks war and assassination. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And I'm in agreement with you. We need to go back to the economic system that this nation started with, the economic system that made the nation and its people prosperous, and get rid of this privatized central bank that impoverishes the people to make the money junkies richer than they already are. All for the cost of ink and paper.
That's right. That's right. And until we do that, we're going to go nowhere. Secondly, I wanted to say that we should approach the popular vote in a way that we should say next election we may consider the popular vote if you allow at least 5 candidates to be in every presidential debate all the way to the election.
Okay, so, well, let me throw a little cold water on you right now. Okay, the Electoral College is set forth in the Constitution. The only way to change it is with a constitutional amendment. That's going to be a huge fight. The Electoral College, if it were not for the Electoral College, then all of our presidents would be selected by just 4 states: California, Texas, New York, and Florida. And everybody else would just have to go along for the ride here. So you need to strike a balance, as the Founding Fathers did. You want the population to be fairly represented, and you want the states as well to be fairly represented. That's the middle ground that you have to find.
I agree. I was just thinking, I'm trying to think outside the box. Also, the fake media is anyone that was left after the consolidation that's on the regular TV. That's who it is. The 6 media outlets that survived the consolidation of the media, those are the fake media.
Of course they are, and that was the whole point of allowing them to consolidate the media. There used to be laws in this country saying that no one entity could own too much of the media in order to preserve a diversity of opinion for the American people to hear, see, read, and analyze and decide for themselves. The consolidation of the media was designed to turn it into a giant propaganda machine on behalf of corporations and the U.S. government. And they are now clearly on the wane, and they've hit the panic button. Okay, Alex, we're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines for a little bit because I still got some news I need to get through. And we'll probably open up the phone lines again in hour number 3. Now, we have been talking for a long time about the poor quality of American weapons. How America is making the most expensive weapons on earth, and like our health care, they're of poor quality. And the Zumwalt is now tied up down in Panama with engine damage. The new high-tech destroyer, the British Royal Navy, the Duncan, is in trouble. F-22 asphyxiating its pilots. F-35, huge list of problems, and they're now admitting after the most expensive R&D weapons development program in history that it may never actually be suitable for real combat. Same thing with the Gerald R. Ford. Well, the Pentagon has finally found a scapegoat. It's all the fault of those microchips they bought from China. They were buying chips from China because the United States has forgotten how to make chips. They just sold all the machinery to China. You guys make the chips. We'll just buy them back from you. And it's all their fault. Well, that's just more gratuitous China bashing. The Zumwalt was disabled because water leaked in through the shaft seals and got into those electric induction motors that power the screws. That's got nothing to do with chips. Chips do not make shaft seals fail. Chips do not cause corrosion on the hull of the Independence-class littoral combat ships. Chips do not cause the transmissions on the Freedom-class littoral combat ships to grind themselves to pieces. But any scapegoat will do, I guess, here. Now, Barack Obama, moving forward on this law that was passed following 9/11, has now expanded the definition of terrorism to include targeted killings in Somalia. And how wonderfully convenient for him that he had a Somali carry out a knife attack on that university campus yesterday. And what it underscores is that 9/11 has become the one-size-fits-all rubber stamp for war anywhere on Earth. What are they doing over there? Well, that fits under the definition of terrorism. We can use the authorization for force from Congress back in 2011 or back in 2001 to attack them. And I kind of have to wonder what is the thinking here, because the U.S. Is just trapped in the quagmires of Afghanistan and Iraq. They're struggling in Syria, struggling in Yemen, and all these other places. 14, 15 different countries the U.S. is involved in, and they're going to take on another one? I don't think so. Now, the British Defense Secretary, Michael Fallon, has come on out there saying that Trump must stand up to Russia. Don't you dare treat them as an equal. You're the superpower. Act like it. You get it. Shake your fist there. And Michael Fallon is out there drooling and screaming about how bad Russia is and how somebody has to have a tough stance there. And okay, Michael, if that's really the way that you feel, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, here's a day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA's torture centers. Watch your head climbing onto that transport plane, and we'll phone Vladimir Putin and tell him you are on your way to kick his rear end all by yourself. Have fun. Don't forget to send a postcard. I am getting sick and tired of all these war hawks who scream how everyone else should march off to be killed and crippled in foreign lands, but they're going to sit at home. Because after all, they're the elites. They can't dirty their hands with war and blood or even manufacturing, or let alone dig in the dirt for agriculture. That's for the peons to be dealing with. You serfs, you slaves, that's your reason. That's why we leave you alive, to go on out and make war for us here. Meanwhile, this rush to war with Russia is starting to cool. 16 member nations of the European Union are now backing a German proposal for an arms control treaty to say we're going to pull back some of these weapons we've got on Russia's border, and in exchange, Russia will pull back some of their weapons and sort of cool this whole thing down before it really gets out of control. Now, Russia's weapons procurement program is all about getting good weapons at a low cost. It's not the money-making scam the American military-industrial complex is. They have just taken delivery of 6 brand-new submarines for the Black Sea Fleet. These are diesel-electric boats, which are short-range, but they have an advantage in that they're very, very quiet, very difficult to detect. The downside of all nuclear-powered submarines is they make noise. A lot of it. Mostly from that reactor. And there's no way to really stop that from happening. So these diesel-electrics are short-range boats. Meanwhile, Russia has brought back the nuclear missile trains, and they've updated them. They've built a whole new series of them. These are something they came up with during the Cold War, where they had these trains that were just transiting Russia's rail system, and from overhead, where the satellites and aircraft are, they look like ordinary trains, passenger trains, cargo trains, tankers, whatever. But they are carrying launchers for Russian ICBMs. And the idea is the United States doesn't know where they are. See, the U.S. Has their SSBN fleet, but the rest of the missiles are in fixed silos in the Midwest of the United States, and Russia knows where they all are if they need to take them out. The trains obsolete that idea. The U.S. doesn't know where to strike to prevent a retaliation in the event of a nuclear attack. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Germany is responding to the primaries in France by throwing a little bit of a tantrum over Marine Le Pen, who is already talking about a Frexit referendum. And Germany is out there saying they want any French president who's not Le Pen. And now that Francois Fillon is the front runner, they're throwing their support behind him. But you remember earlier in the year, Germany was out there saying they wanted any U.S. president but Donald Trump, which may bode well for Marine Le Pen. Remember what I've said long ago, this push to create a global government has created a political climate that could lead to a global revolution. And it appears to already be happening. Peacefully so far, thank goodness. Over in South Korea, following days of literally millions of people protesting in the streets, the president of South Korea has resigned. This is a major setback for the U.S. agenda of using South Korea to provoke a war with North Korea and through North Korea, China. Now down in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu's in a little bit of hot water because Israel and Germany have both launched investigations into this recent deal about Israel purchasing German submarines. And they found a conflict of interest where apparently Netanyahu applied pressure to cancel an existing contract with one provider and hand the contract to another provider, and there appears to be a cash link back to Netanyahu. Now, we'd all like to get excited, but Netanyahu, like Hillary Clinton, seems able to evade the consequences of their criminal actions time after time after time. So we'll see what's going to happen there. Now, then, as we mentioned before in the context of some of the wildfires that we've had here in the United States, Russia has built the world's best firefighting aircraft, the BE-200. And they are the largest water tankers in the world, and they have been sent down to Israel to try and deal with their out-of-control wildfires near Haifa and Jerusalem and the town of David. And the Palestinians sent in support as well. What we're seeing on Twitter is that apparently some settlers wanted to go out and burn the olive groves of the Palestinians to get them to move away to someplace else, and they rather stupidly did it with a high wind, and it got out of control. And it's not just Israel. There's a major fire down in Tennessee near Gatlinburg, which is a resort area. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is now closed. They're suspecting it may be arson. Terrorists have come on in, but we don't really know yet. And here is the measure of Hillary Clinton supporters. According to a story that we're seeing out of Investment Watch blog, Clinton supporters are now all over Twitter, hoping that Trump's supporters in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, all burn to death. That tells you a lot about the people who supported Hillary Clinton and what they are really, really like. Now, in the context of the fact that the Bush family and the Clinton family were tangled up with that CIA gun and drug running operation into Nicaragua in the mid-1980s, and they all made money off of that, it would almost stand to reason that a big part of Hillary Clinton's support is from our domestic illegal drug trade, who want things to go on just the way they are, where the war on drugs is the war on somebody else's drugs, and they're all making huge amounts of money. with Trump in the White House, if there's a war on drugs, it's going to be on all drugs. And that may explain why Hillary supporters behave the way they do. Now, turning to the economic news, Saudi Arabia is bracing for a coming bankruptcy. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the economic news, and we're talking about Saudi Arabia, which you could be forgiven for thinking was one of the world's richest countries, and for a while it was. And they invested huge amounts of money in some amazing buildings and architecture. They understood the oil was going to run out eventually. They were trying to build a big industrial financial center. And they basically were going along with the forecast of oil revenues and spending. Then the U.S. decided on this harebrained, poorly thought out oil price war against Russia. And oil and gas prices plummeted, and Russia suffered a little bit. It turned out their economy was a little more diversified and resilient than was hoped for by Washington, D.C. And this oil price war actually flashed back and caused a lot more damage to Europe, to South America, especially Venezuela, to Canada, the fracking industry here in the United States of America, and Saudi Arabia. And now they're in trouble because after 2 years of low oil prices, they're in a cash crunch. They got a lot of wealth, but they don't have a lot of liquidity, and it's now being predicted that at the current pace, without some kind of a significant change, Saudi Arabia will go bankrupt in just 3 to 4 years. And this is what happens when Washington, D.C. implements these policies without thinking them all the way through. And I'm sure they have got buildings and buildings full of analysts to think these things through, but they're not paying attention to what they're getting from their own people. Whether it's just their ego, their megalomania, they're being told to go forward with the war by Soros or Israel. And they're making all these foreign policy disasters. Now, down in Venezuela, which has been under economic attack by the U.S. over their refusal to shackle their oil to the U.S. dollar, their currency is now worth so little, shopkeepers are actually weighing the bundles of notes instead of actually counting them. This is Weimar Republic runaway inflation, and we know what that ultimately led to. Complete disaster. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Bolivia has now kicked out the Rothschild banks. They want to get away from this private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest model because they can see, as anybody can see, it's a disaster for the nation and its people. It's great for the private central bank. It's great for their politicians that they encourage to keep the system the way it is. Terrible for the people. So I'm expecting Washington, D.C. to declare Bolivia is the hub of ISIS in the Western Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere and launch the war. Meanwhile, the war on cash is continuing apace. The central bankers are now talking about taxing cash withdrawals from ATMs. Meaning if you go to your ATM and you put in your little card and you ask for $100 in cash, you're going to get 90. And they're really pushing this war on cash. It's spread to Spain. They tried it in India. They locked up the economy. They almost wrecked the place. And they're still pushing for this because if all the money is locked in the banks, then you can't go get it when the banks go bad. They'll just help themselves to your savings account and pay off their creditors. Gee, we're sorry, but, you're not a savings account holder. You're an unsecured investor in the bank. We have a right to take your money and the contents of your safety deposit boxes if we need to. Now, if there's a war on cash here in the United States of America, what you do is you take your little plastic card and you go down to your nearest coin dealer and you empty that card and you get silver and gold investment coins while you still can, because they can't make the cashless society work while private ownership of silver and gold and other investment metals is still allowed. So at the same time they say there's no more cash, they're going to outlaw private ownership of investment metals. But you can find something else, some other commodity you can park your wealth in. Ammunition, batteries, whatever. And they're saying this is all to combat the drug trade and terrorism. Obviously, the people behind the drug trade and terrorism have already figured out a way to get around this. This is about controlling you, about taking away your freedom to do with your money what you want to do. That's what it's really all about. Another article supporting that earlier phone call, this is from Misa's organization, saying that ending the Fed is the key to making America great again. In fact, ending private central banks is the key to making all nations great again. All right, we're going to open the phone lines here, and let's start taking phone calls. Kurt in Alberta, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi there, Mike. I got a couple things. Like in Turkey, Erdogan keeps saying he wants to open the borders if they don't give him what he wants and flood Europe with refugees. Well, to me, that just sounds like total BS, because if he can stop them from coming in now, why can't every other country stop them from moving through the borders? I'm just sort of trying to wonder what your thoughts on that are.
Well, unfortunately, the way Europe is set up, they can't stop them, which is why there's now a panic move to literally build a wall along Europe's borders. And remember how they were saying, oh, Trump's wall is bad, and it's racist and exclusionary. But the Europeans have just had it up to here with this refugee problem. As we have had it up to here with the illegal immigrants, especially now that we're finding out they're voting in such numbers illegally to actually change the outcome of elections. They failed in the case of Hillary, but apparently some other elections were won by Democrats on the basis of huge numbers of illegal immigrant votes, a lot of them especially out in California where it's an out-of-control problem.
Oh no, I understand that part of it, but the biggest question is if he's able to stop 2 million refugees from just flooding across the border whenever he feels like it, why can't every other country, like Greece or who's ever right beside him?
You need to look at a map.
Oh no, I know.
Okay.
Oh, I know, but it's still not that easy for him to stop it. If he can stop it that easy, and then nobody else can, that's what I'm saying.
Well, all he has to do is keep them on the western part of the Bosphorus. And that stops them. That's the land bridge from Asia into Europe.
No, I know.
They can still go northward trying to get through Russia, but Russia's stopping them. Or they can try and get across the Mediterranean, but a lot of them are dying trying to do that. But yes, it's a valid threat that Erdogan is using against Europe. And he may just go ahead and do it anyway, and that could actually bring the European Union down.
Oh, well, yeah, I understand that, where he can stop them on the eastern side, but on the western side of Turkey, Greece can stop them dead cold if they wanted to, too. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It just sounds like propaganda saying, oh, I'm going to open the borders and let them flood through. Like, no other country has the balls to stop them at the border.
Well, I don't think Greece would stop them.
Oh, okay, well, that just doesn't make sense, but... And then another question I have was, with negative interest rates all over the world...
Yeah, wait, hang on a second before you go there. I mean, you need to remember, Greece is part of the European Union. They're bound by Brussels in terms of their immigration policy.
Oh, I understand that,
okay.
But, I mean, they could still put their soldiers on the border and say, you're not coming across. Erdogan's doing the same thing. So.
Yeah, but he's not part of the EU, and now he doesn't want to be.
Yeah. No, I don't think he ever wanted to be, but he was just playing both sides until he found out who was better for him. So, but with that aside, how about negative interest rates in the world? Like,
yes.
That just doesn't make sense to me. To me, it's like the ECB or the Fed or whatever other Japan, Bank of England. They're just giving money to all these banks and whoever else has negative interest rates for 60, 70 years, and it's just another form of QE to everybody in the world.
It really is, and that's another reason why they're pushing the cashless society, because when the negative interest rates go high enough, people are going to start closing their savings accounts, and they're going to go back to doing some kind of a cash-based business. And ultimately, it's going to fail. because the government may refuse to issue a medium of exchange. You'll see people start to set their own up, like Bitcoin was set up by an individual, not by a government. People will print their own paper currency. I used to have these paper notes that were printed during the Civil War from the city of Lynchburg, following the collapse of the Confederate currency, a lot of it through counterfeiting by the Union. The Lynchburg simply wrote their own currency for commerce to exist in the town. The same thing will happen. I used to joke about how they're never going to have the cashless society because what would politicians stick in the G-strings of the strippers? But I expect you'll see strip clubs will have their own internal script where you'll go on in, swipe your plastic, they'll hand you a stack of these little paper tickets, and you get to poke those into the G-strings. People will come up with their own medium of exchange. The U.S. government can forbid you from copying their currency, but they can't forbid you from coming out with your own. It simply doesn't work that way. You could currency is whatever people agree to exchange that has a recognized and agreed upon unit of value. Seashells, beads, whatever. There's going to be commerce on a cash-based basis. And all the Federal Reserve and the banks can do is basically isolate themselves from the rest of society, and they'll have lots of money to trade back and forth and feel like they're still titans of industry. But you're going to see the rest of the world just pull away from them and come up with alternative systems. Just like we're seeing the world pull away from Google and Facebook and YouTube and start to sign on with this plethora of replacements that are coming online, seizing the opportunity, the window of opportunity, to come out with social media that is free from government intervention.
Yeah, and didn't they do that in the 30s when all the banks failed as well?
Yeah, they did. There was an interesting story about one town, I think it was in Ohio, where the town newspaper was running basically cash deficit. So what he did was he used his own printing presses to print up these tickets that were good for advertising on his newspaper, and he started trading those to merchants in the town for what he needed for his newspaper, oil, linseed oil, whatever, for the ink and so forth. And the merchants could then eventually come on back and redeem the ticket for an ad in his newspaper. Well, these tickets were very common. There were a lot of them in circulation, and people came to trust and rely on those more than the U.S. currency, and that became the currency of the town, these little advertising vouchers. People are going to find a way to carry on commerce. If the central banks abandon cash, if the governments abandon cash, people are going to abandon the government and the central bank and say, we're going to go back to a very simple model of commerce that we understand that's under our control.
Yeah, no, that's true. And the stuff you were talking to earlier about how ATMs are going to start to tax and different things, is it just a way for, like the U.S. with the reserve currency of the world, is it just a way for all the peripheral countries start to collapse first, and then the smaller countries, and then that's what the Fed and whoever else, the big bankers, will blame everything on?
Well, basically all it's about is the bankers don't want the money to leave their banks. In the 1930s and certainly during the Civil War, bank runs were common, and they were halted by the FDIC insurance program. But right now, the bank's exposures are so great they're going to overwhelm all of these government safeguard programs, and there will be runs on the bank, where people are going to go on in and say, I'm closing my savings account, I want my $15,000 or whatever it is in cash in my hand, and the banks don't have a legal right to refuse. So they're all on board with this banning of cash so that when the people come up to a collapsing bank and knock on the door and say, we want to close our savings account, the bankers will say, okay, to what bank do you want your money transferred? Or, basically, they're going to say, we cannot give you your wealth in your hand. It must be somewhere in our system. And it's a way of locking the money in the financial system away from the people whose labor created that wealth in the first place.
But didn't the banks and all the G20s already put a thing in saying that the money is no longer yours in the bank? You're just you're a lender to the bank, and you're not even the first if the banks go under? Yeah,
that came out of the G20, and it was enacted into U.S. law by the Congress, I think, a little over 2 years ago. And that's basically it. If you're a savings account holder, you are considered an unsecured investor in the bank and therefore liable for the bank's losses, which is why I continue to say you should have no more money in the bank than you need to cover your immediate obligations. You should have the rest under your control, some of it in precious metals.
Yeah, okay. And just a side note, like I saw that, and did the U.S. pass a law a few years ago saying they can now use propaganda on their own people?
Yes. What they did is they rescinded the existing law saying that they could not.
Oh, okay. So they just rescinded it, but they didn't actually pass a law.
Well, I mean, they've been propagandizing us all along. They just decided, let's just, get rid of the law because it's just creating more paperwork for us.
Okay, so basically there's nothing you can believe in anything anybody says anymore.
You shouldn't believe anything coming out of the government or the corporate media at this time. How do you know when they're lying? Their mouths move and words come out.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm starting to see a little bit of that in Trump with who he's picking up and putting in his cabinet and stuff.
Well, that's his job, is to come up with an administration. And he did evade an attempt to have his White House infiltrated by neocons. That's why Chris Christie got demoted. But again, he's not even in office yet. It's too soon to be passing quality judgments on Donald Trump until he actually has the job. And so we need to avoid the Monday morning quarterbacking situation. Do you remember what Teddy Roosevelt said about the arena? Okay, well, Donald Trump is the man in the arena. Let's give him a chance to kick up some dust before we sit on the sidelines with our pretzels and beer and start to act like we know what he should be doing, okay?
Oh, no, I understand that, but it's when you start picking certain people out of the CFR, it just starts to look like the old boys club all over again. So.
Well, which people are you critical about?
Well, I'm not just anybody in general, but there's a few coming out of the CFR.
Which ones?
Usually, oh, sorry, my mind is just blanking right now. I've just read.
Okay, so you're upset that he's picking people out of the CFR, but you don't know who he's picked out of the CFR just yet. Okay, well, I sense a problem there. Anyway, listen, thank you very much for the phone call. We're coming up on a commercial break. We're going to let you go here, and we'll be right back with more phone calls. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go back to the phones. Mike in South Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael.
Aloha.
You all have a saying over there in Hawaii. Aloha, nui nui.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. Aloha means love, hello, goodbye, and everything. Nui simply means more, and nui nui means more. So that's the origin of that.
You're in the Deep South. We simply say, hi, y'all. You mentioned Gatlinburg. I had an early morning phone call from Knoxville, Tennessee this morning, and the update as far as I can get right now is over 30 stores have burned in Gatlinburg. About 10% of the log cabin rentals are gone.
Oh, man.
And it was closing in on Dollywood. They were fighting yesterday 50-mile-an-hour winds, which created a big problem. Firefighters were being flown in from Alaska, and I think they said Canada. I'm not sure about that. But it's a pretty serious situation. Today and tomorrow they're supposed to have some heavy rain settling in. They're hoping that'll calm everything down. But everybody in the whole area right now is on alert, and they have evacuated quite a few people from that area. So that's the current update I've got for that.
Well, thank you very much for that update. And we know wildfires, especially out west, we've seen some really bad ones. This gets back to what I was saying before about how the United States has been on a wartime economy going all the way back to 2003, where our money is all being spent on bombs, bullets, bandages, bombers, so forth, and our nation is being neglected. And one area it's being neglected is in keeping the accumulation of dead brush down in our wilderness areas, keeping the fire roads bulldozed open to prevent wildfires from getting out of control. And we have seen many, many times before these wildfires will hit in areas that have been abandoned and neglected because the budgets for this kind of maintenance work have been cut. And everybody says, well, we're not going to take care of this, and we just hope there won't be a fire, and we hope there won't be a flood, and we hope that it won't be a mistake that we let the garbage accumulate in the storm drains and so forth. And they keep getting burned on all this. In this case, literally.
the droughts in the last 2 or 3 years everywhere have contributed to this greatly, and I don't think people realize how sensitive you can set these woods up centrally. And by the way, there's also a strong suspicion that some of those fires over there near Gatlinburg are being set purposely.
Well, I don't know. This may be a continuation. It's starting to feel like they're getting ready to wag terrorist at us again. In fact, Fox News was just now saying that this knife attacker at OSU was inspired by ISIS. They don't actually have a connection between him and ISIS, but they think he was inspired by ISIS because ISIS has recommended using knives as a means of attack, which it's not like that isn't a common implement anyway. And it does come hard on the heels of, Netanyahu initially blaming Israel's wildfires on acts of terrorism. So, we might be told that the Gatlinburg wildfires were set by ISIS, and we have to go to war against somebody.
Well, did you just finish reporting that?
Can I hold you over the station identification?
Yes.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking with Mike in South Carolina about what's going on over in Gatlinburg. I would hope that they've got water tankers operating over there. I note that they've got Douglas Lake is in the immediate vicinity, so they don't have to travel very far to scoop up the water. Maybe Russia would consider sending one of those giant BE-200s down there to assist as well. I do know last year during some of the wildfires out west, the Russians offered to come on in and help deal with those fires, and they were told no by the U.S. government because Russia's our enemy and we don't let Russia do anything nice and so forth and so on. But it is a terrible tragedy, and, the conditions are just ideal for a flash fire. And I don't know if it's arson or not. It may be a perfectly natural fire, but if Washington, D.C. decides they need this to be arson in order to sell us another war, that's what they'll tell us.
Yeah, the Great Smokies have been shut down. You can't get in there right now because of all this. I'm 2 hours away, and I can smell the smoke from here, even up in our woods in North Carolina, South Carolina. They're still on fire up there. And I think the major big problem they're having getting the fires out and the dumping of the waters get out of Douglas Lake is the fact that the winds are so strong, Michael, you can't fly in these winds. So I think that's what's curtailing a lot of that ability to put those fires out.
Well, I imagine that kind of a wind would be a problem for the smaller water drop tankers, but I think the larger ones could definitely do it by flying straight into the wind. It would actually lower their speed at the lake surface. Anyway, this is all technical firefighter issues. I certainly hope they're able to get these fires under control and get some rain up there tonight. But again, I'm very worried that everybody's out there already saying arson, arson, arson. Obama's out there talking about declaring Somali a hotbed of terrorism, had this convenient knifing at the Ohio State University, and they're already out there saying it was inspired by ISIS. So it looks like we're on the cusp of a new false flag to sell us yet another push for war so they can get things really rocking and rolling before Trump can take office.
It all kind of blends in together with the Somalians coming over here in masses. All Obama has to do is say, just light them up. It all kind of works out the same way, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, there's an important question. Who decided to let this guy into this country in the first place? And where was the NSA and CIA and FBI in thwarting a terror attack? Once again, they have proven themselves to be completely impotent and a waste of time and money, as far as I'm concerned.
You mentioned that who was it? Israel has got another 6 submarines. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, that makes a total of 9 or 10. The best way to stop that aggression from Israel is simply sink those submarines with Netanyahu on them and get rid of that piece of garbage.
Well, all those fish that are in the Mediterranean have never done us any harm, and I think sinking Netanyahu down there to the bottom, that would be cruelty to animals. Okay, so I'm going to have to veto that idea. All right, Mike, I'm going to have to...
Putin's already sunk one of the submarines. He did 2 years ago. So
I don't think that happened. I don't think that happened. I think that that was something else, because if Putin had really done that, we'd be at a nuclear war by now. Mike, I'm going to let you go and switch over. Mike, I got to let you go. Got a lot of phone calls, running out of time. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. On Saudi Arabia
There was that CIA report that said they had 3 to 5 years left, and also France has about 5 years left because of the debt problem they have. So you're looking at the death of the petrodollar, the rise of a multipolar world in our lifetime, Mike.
I would absolutely agree. We're going to see it happen. The question is, how bad will the crash be and how bloody it's all going to get? But we're on the cusp of a major change to the world, and we're going to see the current oligarchs, the money junkies, drawn down. We're going to see the redemocratization of our societies instead of these illusions of democracy that we're just now realizing we live under.
And Mike, on the migration issue, Erdogan has a lot of cards to play. There was a book out called Weapons of Mass Migration. You can use these migrants to flood into a country to basically bribe those countries of Europe. That's what's happening.
You can destroy the economy of a nation by flooding them with people who can't work, have no skills, and simply absorb the social services. And that's a big part of why Europe is in trouble right now. In addition to that private central bank they have that they're all now enslaved to, which is just piling up more and more debt, now they have all these refugees, most of whom are not contributing anything to the society and are a drain on the tax coffers.
And Erdogan's just waiting while the rest of the West falls slowly because he's already in line with Putin and China. That deal's already been set. So it might look like
it looked like that way. It looked like that way, but I can't imagine Turkey going after Assad without it causing some repercussions in their brand new relationship with Russia.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna. I mean, what he says is one thing, what he does is another. But he is securing that portion up there to keep any other forces from coming in to attack Russia. You know what I mean? So
we'll see how far he goes. We'll see how far.
He has to say something because he doesn't want to. Because he's got to play both sides right now. You know, I don't really know his whole plan, but I still think that he is in with the Russians and the Chinese because of the Gulen guy in Pennsylvania.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm going to be studying this issue a lot more closely and try and figure out what the game is. But Erdogan did not need to say, I'm going after Assad in order to take control of the border. He could simply say, I'm taking control of our border. What the question is, how far into Syria are Turkish military forces proceeding, and that'll tell us what the real game is going to be. Dustin, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network now. We're talking about various issues, the war zones, the economy. We're taking phone calls right now, 800-313-9443. And let's go to James in South Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I've looked all over the Internet, and I cannot find a breakdown for the election according to congressional district. And I'm wondering if you could...
I've seen a couple of them right now. I mean, I've seen the county maps. And basically...
That's all I've seen is counties.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a collected map of the congressional districts yet because... if you're looking at a congressional district map in terms of the presidency, I don't see much point in creating one. There were certainly the maps that show which representatives won and which senators won.
Well, people are wondering what to do about the Electoral College. I think there is a way to change it. If the states, without involvement in the Constitution, they could set up each district, each congressional district, and assign one vote according to the district, according to the winner of the district, as opposed to the winner of the state. And then the winners of the state could get the two, could be given two, and that would not upset the original intent of the population versus the state.
Unfortunately, the composition of the Electoral College is defined in the Constitution. It's not up to the states. What the states...
The states do it. Maine does it, and Nebraska does it now. If you see, Maine was, I think they got 3 electoral votes went to Clinton and 1 went to Trump, and Nebraska has I think has the option of doing it that way, but I think all of them went to Trump.
Yeah, all of them went to Trump.
They can do that.
Okay.
And,
well, I think there ought to be a national standards. One of the reasons our election system is such a mess is everybody is doing it differently. Everybody's got different laws, and it makes it very, very hard for anybody to get a clear picture of what's going on, which may be intentional to discourage all but the most dedicated from trying to figure out just how these elections are being run and, more importantly, how they're being stolen.
Well, it would be interesting to know how the Electoral College would have come out if it was done by a congressional district. I mean, I would tend to think that some districts in, say, California would have voted for Trump.
Well, see, there's a problem with that. There are far more congressional districts than there are electoral votes.
But instead of Clinton getting all 55, Trump would have gotten some. I mean, I'm just saying it would be different or could be different. It's just an idea. I mean, it is being done at least in 2 states. So that's all.
All right. Well, we'll take a look at it. But right now, for the purpose of the presidency, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, going on into the election, agreed to play by the current set of rules. And are the rules good or bad? Nobody's really sure. Are they perfect? Probably not. But they ran their campaigns to win according to those rules, to win electors. Donald Trump wasn't out to win the popular vote. He was out there to win electors. And he did. He's won 306 electors. That's like the largest number of electors for several presidential administrations. And now Hillary and her whiners are out there because they didn't get the result they wanted. They're out there saying, well, change the rules. Change the rules. I mean, Hillary won the popular vote, if you include the illegal immigrants and the dead voters. You know, so make her the president. Change the rules. And they don't get to do that.
No, I think the Constitution should be adhered to. But I'm saying this is a way, if anybody wanted to, that you could do it, and it wouldn't interfere with the Constitution. That's all I'm saying. Okay, well, that would have to be handled by the states. One thing I do think all the states should do, I think about 30 of them do now, they all should do, is simply say, if you're an elector, you will comply with the will of the voters in your state and provide heavy penalties for faithless electors in order to guarantee that the person winning the office is the one we, the people, want. And one of the things that really angers me is this displayed attitude coming out of Washington, D.C., that we're all too stupid to know what candidate we want. And they're out there screaming about this populism. How can you have populism? Well, populism is at the core of democracy. And they're literally out there saying, you're all too stupid to know what you're thinking or what's going on. You should just trust us to pick our own leaders. That's what the Democrats were saying to their own voters all during the primary season. And it's another reason why Hillary lost, because a lot of those Democrats didn't like being told, we'll decide for you who your nominee is going to be. And they crossed party lines to vote for Donald Trump. The illusion that holds our society together is that we, the voters, are still somehow in control of the direction of this nation. And everything they've been doing this entire election, whether it was rigging the Democratic primaries, the media ganging up on Donald Trump, all of this recount nonsense, the illegal immigrant vote, the dead votes, what they're doing is they're destroying that illusion. And that illusion that we, the voters, ultimately control the fate of our nation is what convinces us to go along with all of the laws of the government, no matter how absurd and silly they are, to go on paying our taxes, and ultimately to sacrifice our child's lives in their wars. If we're not in control of the nation, if the democracy is an illusion, if the elections are a sham, then we, the American people, are neither legally nor morally obligated to obey that government that claims authority over us on the basis of fraud. We're not obligated to pay their out-of-control bills. And we're certainly not obligated to sacrifice life and limb of our children in their pointless wars of conquest. Anyway, James, thanks for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Ralph in New York City. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. How you doing? Just to say you're very popular here in New York, just to let you know.
Thank you. I'm getting popular here in Hawaii. I actually got recognized at the bank the other day. That came as a real shock.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to know, you're well known in the college campuses here in New York City and NYU and also in Columbia University campuses, all your flyers.
Well,
all
hello
your...
to Columbia and NYU and all those other university college students. Thanks for paying attention, because unfortunately, if we fail in our job, you all get to live with the mistake. And we're working really, really hard to leave to you a better world than was left to us.
WhatReallyHappened.com is all over the billboards and the hallways of the college campuses. We see the logos and we see your face on it all the time.
Oh my goodness! Oh, my ego knows no bounds.
You well known here in New York City. Just to let you know. Anyway, my question to you is, what's going to happen? The agenda under the Medicare. In the Trump administration, they're talking about all over CNN right now. What's your view on this?
Well, my view is that promises have been made to the American people, and those promises do need to be kept. What I would recommend, if I were actually part of the Trump administration, is to stop treating Medicare, Medicaid, all these programs as separate, including Obamacare, and come up with a grand, unified, single-payer system modeled after what they have in France, and solve the problem that way. Because when you've got multiple agencies, there's a lot of overlap, there's a lot of duplication of effort, there's a lot of waste, and I think it's time basically for a complete overhaul and simply say, we're going to shut all of those down, we're going to build a new, single, centralized health care for the American people that is really concerned about their health and not just another get-rich-quick scheme. That's what I would recommend.
So just basically a one-page system, even for veterans also.
Oh, we've got to clean up that mess with the Veterans Administration. I mean, they need to be scraped out to the walls and completely replaced. They're still doing things on paper records. This idea that they're simply ignoring and abandoning our wounded veterans until they die, that is shameful. And for those of you who are parents of children about to reach military age, you should show them all of this stuff going on with the VA and remind them the U.S. government may demand your loyalty, your life and limb in wars, but if you survive and you come home injured, that you're not going to get it back. You're considered a liability, and they just want you to go away and stop bothering them.
Exactly. Well, Mike, I work in a hospital. and I work with a lot of mentally ill people, and just to let you know, Donald Trump's son is saying right now that his son has autism. Are you aware about that?
Well, it's been rumored around. Rosie O'Donnell asked the question. She drew a lot of flack for it until she came on out and said one of her children has been diagnosed with autism, and that changes the complexion immediately. And all of a sudden, we're in a situation.
Also Robert De Niro too.
Yeah, Robert De Niro, Rosie O'Donnell, possibly Donald Trump. I haven't gotten a confirm on that now, but that's a lot of political and star power that is going to be looking at this issue of why autism rates are just skyrocketing. And there's
vaccines also.
Representative Bill Posey and Dan Burton are on board of this. They have been chastising the CDC over that fraudulent report. But here's something to consider. Okay, at the beginning of the 20th century, autism was virtually unknown. It never happened. And then by 1979, it was affecting about 1 out of every 6,000 children, according to the latest numbers I could find. Now it's up to 1 out of every 45 to 50, depending upon who you're asking. At that rate of growth, by the year 2030, half of our children are going to be diagnosed with autism, unless we find what's gone wrong and changes it. That means half of the available American population are not going to be able to join the workforce, and of the remaining workforce, most of those are going to be taken up in the care and support of those autistic children. So this vaccine program is very profitable for the pharmaceutical industries in the short run, but in the long view, we are heading toward an economic, systemic crisis of a population of our country that cannot perform all the jobs necessary to keep the country going, let alone build for the future. And that is something I'm going to make a big stink about.
Too, right?
Well, I'm talking about the population being born in 2030. Half of those are expected to be diagnosed as autistic unless we identify the real cause of autism and deal with it decisively now.
I'm just saying, even the millennials are included in this particular generation also, right?
No, because the millennials have already been born. Okay, the millennials we have now are the ones that have an autism rate of 1 out of every 50 or 60. Okay?
Wow. Okay.
Okay, I'm talking about the generation that will be born in 2030. At the current exponential growth of autism rates, half of them will be autistic, most of them male. For some reason, it's hitting men more than it's hitting women. And we need to make a big stink about this, because as profitable as vaccines are for the vaccine companies, and even autism is a big business now, $200 billion a year, caring for autistic children. Money, 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 money. But in the long run, it's going to crash our entire nation unless it is dealt with decisively now. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call, Ralph. We're going to let you go. Back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the phones here, a story that's coming on in. I got to do some actual news here. As you know, Jill Stein has sued Wisconsin to force hand recounts across the state. It is arguable that these states could not complete a recount prior to the Electoral College convening in 3 weeks, and maybe that's her goal. She's just upped the ante by filing a lawsuit in Pennsylvania to force them to do a hand recount. That is not going to go anywhere because, first of all, Jill Stein missed the filing deadline in Pennsylvania, and second, under Pennsylvania state law, a candidate cannot demand a recount. It must be ordered by a court of law upon being presented prima facie evidence of election fraud. But Jill has missed the deadline there. What is she thinking? Why is she still pushing on this thing? I mean, are they thinking they can find some way to take Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan out of the Electoral College? Because in that case, it would take only 8 faithless electors to hand the White House to Hillary Clinton. Are they still desperately clinging to that dream? Michigan's already had a hand recount. Their initial election was so close under Michigan law, a hand recount was mandated. Trump won, handily, I might add. So is that the goal, to try and take Pennsylvania and Wisconsin out of play with regard to the Electoral College? That would require 18 faithless electors, which I don't think is going to happen. But she's still pushing this. And by the way, we are now getting word that Hillary Clinton is already planning her 2020 campaign, where she's going to come in and take that White House back from Donald Trump. So there's the timeline right there. We have got 4 years to get an honest, verifiable, transparent, reliable, auditable election system in this country. Because Hillary's going to come back with twice as many illegal immigrants and twice as many dead voters and twice as many rigged electronic election machines. She will not be denied. All right, let's grab some more phone calls. Andy in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hey, Mike, you know what? I think one of the major things that we can look at as to how we went wrong, if we want to find out what the heck has been going on, is that we can go back to whatever time it is. I don't know exactly what time it is, but we can go back to a point in time where a generation of people allowed the teaching of the Constitution and how to be free and live your life and whatnot. Somewhere, somehow, that generation said, hey, yeah, we don't need to teach them that.
Well, certainly in the post-World War II years, there was a tremendous emphasis in the public schools on teaching the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and why we'd had to fight the war. But that started eroding away toward the end of the 1960s and 1970s. And today, in our public schools, they don't actually give the kids the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They get a textbook from Common Core which describes to them what's in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and the descriptions are fraudulent. For example, Common Core teaches our kids that the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms is a privilege the government may withdraw at their discretion. No, that's not what a right is. A right is something that's hands off. You may not touch that. And on that very subject, apparently down in Texas, a judge has struck down a major provision of the Gun Control Act of 1968. He found the federal interstate handgun transfer ban to be unconstitutional. So the pushback is beginning on that. But in the end, you need to understand, state-controlled schools are going to teach your kids what the state wants them to think and believe. It's called the Prussian model. If you want your kids to know what's really going on, even if you've got two working parents, take the time to sit down with your kid and say, this is what's really going on. This is what's in the Bill of Rights. And you're going to have to tell them. They can't trust the government to be truthful. They can't trust corporate media to be truthful. And they certainly can't trust their schools to be truthful. That's the reality. Anyway, I'm sorry. We're going to have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. Andy, back with more phone calls after these few words. America, welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to the telephones here, I want to do an update. It's now being reported on multiple sources that Turkey's Erdogan has literally issued a statement saying we are in Syria to end the rule of the tyrant Assad. This amounts to a declaration of war between Turkey and Syria. And this is very alarming because, if Turkey and Syria go at it, that's fine. I imagine that Assad will ask for Russia's assistance, and at that point the U.S. will come in and say, well, we're on the side of Turkey against Assad, and they're off and running. I told you they were going to start this war for real before Trump could take office. And it looks like it's happening. And this, by the way, is getting no coverage at all on the corporate media. They're going on about the Tennessee wildfires, as they should. But basically, for all intents and purposes, Turkey just declared war on Syria to get Bashar al-Assad. All righty, we're going to go back to the phones here. David in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how are you, Michael? I'm glad you raised that. I think I've mentioned that I believe that ISIS was created by Dick Cheney and Genie Energy, and so Turkey was actually very involved with that because Dick Cheney wanted to run a pipeline up to Turkey from the Golan Heights, and it would cross Syria's front yard. So, the ISIS, as I claim, ISIS was created as a private army for Dick Cheney and Genie Energy. So, well,
it was a PR stunt to get to build U.S. support to go into Syria. I mean, if you think about what they were asking Assad to do. Okay, Israel is stealing oil out of Syria's Golan Heights, and then they have the nerve to ask Assad for permission to run a pipeline across Syrian territory so they can send the oil they're stealing from Syria up to Europe. And, of course, Assad's going to say no.
Yeah, and then, of course, if you see those famous photographs of Senator McCain standing on the front porch with the founding figures of ISIS, this was in 2013, if I remember right. All you have to do is a quick Google search of Senator McCain plus ISIS, and you're going to get these photographs.
And of course, all the revelations coming out of the State Department documents and the leaked emails that President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton were smuggling weapons to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria to use against Assad, using that consulate in Benghazi as the smuggling hub.
Right. Exactly, and that training ground was in Turkey, where the front porch that McCain is standing on is in Turkey. Yeah, so I'm glad you raised that. That's an ugly issue. And another thing, I agree with you, and I'm glad you raised the idea of single payer. To me, the Americans can buy anything they want in bulk with our tax money. And buying a hospital, buying 1 million aspirin at a penny a piece instead of $10 a piece, the way the HMOs are selling them to us. Single payer is just Americans buying in bulk. And these HMOs have been trying to scare us into saying, well, this is communism or something like that. That's nonsense.
Now,
we've been able to have county hospitals forever, and this...
Well, all the HMOs go back to the administration of Richard Nixon, which is when the medical establishment, the people in charge of the medical establishment, big business moved in and they said, okay, this is not about the health of the public anymore. This is an opportunity to make money off of sick people. And the sicker we can keep them, the more money we'll make, and that is really why our medical reality is the way it is. We have the most expensive medical care on earth. It ranks 37th in quality, and Americans as a whole, our health is rated as poor compared to other industrialized nations because of all the food additives and chemicals and all this other stuff, prescription antidepressants, and there's absolutely no concern for what's really best for the health of the American people. It's all about getting more money out of the people. Our current medical industrial complex is running on the same moral level as those traveling Wild West medicine show salesmen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, let's see, I think if you watch that, Michael Moore made a movie a while back called Sicko, and you were just talking about Nixon, and there's a scene in there where Richard Nixon is sitting with John Ehrlichman, and I think they're playing one of the audio from one of those Watergate tapes, and he's conspiring with John Ehrlichman about how to get rid of the Hippocratic Oath, which said that doctors are supposed to heal you first and then deal with money later. And so by changing the Hippocratic Oath, he was able to give free rein to the HMOs to just milk us and loot the baby boom. So, yeah, that whole creepy business. Hey, the real reason I called, though, I heard you talking about putting nuclear weapons on railroad cars.
Yes.
And Ronald Reagan actually was trying to do this. I think he wanted to do it out in Utah. He was claiming that you could do it out in the desert and that'd be just swell. Well, the only trouble with doing that is that when you start looking at floods, or you take a nuclear weapon and you start running it around 24 hours a day, the chances of a wheel falling off a train or having a flash flood and wiping out the bridge, or much less wearing out a bridge by running a train over it every 6 hours or something like that. These guys were basically putting highly poisonous projects in a constantly mobile sort of way, and the opportunity, the old idea of simplify comes into pass in this. You never want to put poisonous things in a flux. You want to always keep them in the safest place possible. And
well, that's the idea. Let me back up here a little bit because you've misunderstood both Putin and Reagan's plan. Putin's plan for the trains is these trains with the missiles are posing as regular trains, and that means they run like the regular trains. They'll do a run, they'll park on a siding for a couple of days. They'll do another run, they'll park on another siding. They're not running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because that would be very obvious to the spy satellites, and they'd be easy to identify. Reagan's plan was to build a private railroad out there in the middle of the desert that would have a whole bunch of trains on it, some of which had nuclear missiles to stay within the limits of the imposed the treaties, the limits on nuclear weapons. There'd be 20 trains out there. 6 of them would have nuclear missiles on board. The Russians didn't know which one because every few days they'd move the trains around. That was basically the model there. As far as not having these kind of toxic materials close to population centers, you would be very shocked at how often dangerous chemicals and nuclear materials are trucked through the towns and villages of the United States of America on a regular basis inside 18-wheel tractor-trailer rigs.
Oh, I know, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, that whole thing about, Yucca Mountain down in Las Vegas, or near Las Vegas, if I remember right, they were going to have so many loads per day. It was tens of thousands of truckloads per day we're going to have to be going through there in order to haul. And it's not just the rods, but it's, the radioactive bulldozers and radioactive, boots and shoes. And,
they were planning on cleaning up some of that mess up at Hanford and taking that to Yucca Mountain. But along with people who lived near that mountain being very concerned about the safety issues, it turned out that mountain had some fault systems inside it, which raised the possibility of a potential earthquake, just shattering all this stuff and throwing it all over the You know, now
it's also the biggest aquifer in western the U.S.
And we're running out of aquifers because the fracking is contaminating them. What I would suggest, I mean, we do have an issue with nuclear waste. We got to clean up the remains of Fukushima. Chernobyl, they just dragged the newly constructed containment around the old containment that was falling apart. But it is a mess. I would recommend that we find one of these extinct volcanoes here in the South Pacific, because lava has the consistency of poured concrete, and just put all this stuff inside that crater and mark it as don't come near here. There's actually an island near us here in Hawaii called Christmas Island that was used as a radioactive dump for a while. And so as long as there's no leaching from within the remains of the volcanic crater into the ocean, I think it's a lot safer to put it there than inside a salt mine in Yucca Flats, let alone Hanford.
Well, the only trouble with a volcano is, you know, you can't turn this stuff into smoke because that ash becomes very poisonous. And that's what...
I said, an extinct volcano. We have a lot of volcanoes down here that haven't erupted for millions and millions of years. And that has to do with the fact of the Pacific Plate dragging over the hot spot. There's a lot of volcanoes down here that haven't erupted for millions of years. It's just this giant cone with the strength of poured concrete, and I think that would be a much better place to be storing this stuff. It would be certainly more expensive to take it down there, and I think that's why they were looking at Yucca Mountain, because it's much less expensive to just truck the stuff there. But if you really want someplace where you're going to put it, where nobody's going to mess with it for a couple of centuries, I would definitely recommend an extinct volcano.
Well, yeah, it's too unmanageable. I mean, that's the whole problem with it. If you remember when Fukushima started going off, they had if I remember right, it was Reactor 4, and Reactor 4 had a water tank, their coolant system. They had all of these rods, and it put a crack in that. It was basically a swimming pool. If I remember right, it was 18 feet deep.
Yes.
And they hung this swimming pool along the top side of the building. So when the earthquake happened, it put a crack in there and started draining the water right away.
Yeah.
And so as soon as those rods became exposed, they basically burst into flames and then turned into radioactive smoke. And that smoke got all the way into Canada, and if I remember right, it got all the way to Moscow and whatnot.
We certainly had it here. Listen, we're starting to run out of time here real quick.
Yeah, no
absolutely, we should definitely shut down fission reactors, make the leap into clean fusion reactors. China's already achieved break-even on fusion reactors. Thorium cycle reactors, a lot of countries starting to get into that. That might be something that Trump might consider developing as an exportable product, a safe alternative to fission reactors. But most countries that are nuclear powers love those fission reactors because, along with electricity, they make bomb stuff. And that just gets them all hot and bothered. Anyway, listen.
Remember the old Atoms for Peace? There was the old Atoms for Peace, and they swore back in the 50s, oh, you could never make a bomb out of these. And that showed the lie of that.
I remember Atoms for Peace. They were out there saying, we have peaceful uses for nuclear weapons. We're going to make a brand new harbor on this coastline, and we'll set it off, and we'll have a brand new harbor, and all the radioactivity will be trapped by the debris that falls down. I mean, it was just completely nonsensical stuff. Anyway, David, I got to let you go here. We got a few more phone calls. I'm almost out of time. We have a call from a black Trump supporter in the Northeast. And aloha, what's on your mind?
Okay, Michael, you're an American hero. First off, I want to just tell you that. But I want to, and this is my first time calling too, so I'm a little bit nervous. But I want to give you an update on the recount scam / possible theft from your article with the anonymous video. So the Wisconsin thing. So Jill Stein, she paid they were supposed to make the $430 payment. They made the payment today. And then they're reporting that Hillary is joining in on the hand recount lawsuit. Okay? Now with Pennsylvania, hello?
Yes, you're on the air. Keep going.
Oh, okay. With Pennsylvania, you're kind of right with the deadline missed, but but it's more to it. There was 3 ways that she could get the recount in Pennsylvania. Okay? The first way was if Trump had won by only 0.5%, it would have been automatic. But since it was over 1%, she didn't get that way. So the second and the third way, the second way is if they get the 30,000 people, like they said, from 9,000 counties. And this is a funny part too, that they did get some of there was two deadlines. Some of the counties had the deadline for the 21st, and I think it was that some of the counties had a deadline for the 28th. And so the ones that went for the 28th, when they went to go file, they had to pay $150, they're saying, and some of them didn't do it because I guess they didn't have the money. But they have a court date on Monday at 10 o'clock. And so that's where it's at now. And like, I'm nervous. Like, I hope that demon doesn't try and steal it.
Well, it certainly looks like she's going to, but, again, I mean, this is just making a joke of our entire democracy. And I'll tell you, if Hillary steals the White House, it will start a civil war. I mean, there's no question about it. Nobody is going to accept the legitimacy of a Hillary Clinton presidency at this point. Not after all the fraud of the primaries, not after all the gaming. This is really absurd. This woman is literally risking the nation itself with her lust for power and control.
Hillary, but we got to put Jill in there too. She's a demon too. Jill is a demon too.
Jill is only doing this because Hillary put it up to her.
She's still a demon in my book, but that they got to go to a court now. That the video was saying, like, you know, they're going to come up and make up this proof, and here's the proof, and you got to believe us type of thing. So, but maybe they won't buy it in court. You know what I mean? It's going to be a judge that they got to go and present this to, but it's at 10 o'clock in the morning on Monday.
I mean, this is just insane. This is insane. I mean, we have somebody who is so hungry for that White House, she's willing to wreck the entire nation in the process. I mean, that alone tells us we made the right choice in voting for Donald Trump.
Amen on that one, brother. So, and now the Michigan one, that's tomorrow. So then I read that for everything it's going to cost $9 million in the area. And they were saying that she only got up to 6 point something, almost close to 7 million. So if they keep an eye out where that money's coming from, that other demon, George Soros.
Yeah, he's behind this. I mean, Jill Stein got more for this recount than she did for her entire presidential campaign. Here's the thing. Michigan's already had a hand recount because their initial results on Election Day were close enough to mandate a hand recount. A new hand recount isn't going to change a single thing there. And it looks to me like Hillary's plan really is to find some way to jam these three states up in the court system, Florida 2000 all over again, so that she can go into the Electoral College, and she's only going to need a handful of faithless electors to steal the White House. And I mean, this is just completely out of control at this point. She's going to start a civil war. All right, we got to let you go. Take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today here. And I sure, like most of you, we sort of hoped that the Bush-Clinton narcocracy would go gracefully into the dustbin of history, but obviously not. It looks like we're heading for a crisis, because if Hillary steals the White House, there will be a civil war, and there's going to be a lot of blood in the streets. And I really would like to avoid that. But apparently no price is too great to pay for Empress Hillary I to steal the throne here. I would strongly recommend that Donald Trump immediately file for his own recounts in all those states that Hillary won by razor-thin margins, with an eye toward detecting election fraud. Because Hillary still thinks she can find a way forward to this thing. I hope she's just being delusional. I hope the court in Pennsylvania is going to say, look, this is frivolous, because even if Pennsylvania's recount were to flip the election the other way, Trump is still ahead in the recount, in the electoral votes. Hillary's strategy apparently is to try and take Pennsylvania and Wisconsin out of the Electoral College by tangling them up in legal proceedings. At which point she would need 18 electors for Donald Trump to betray Donald Trump and vote for her? It's absurd. All right, last phone call of the day. Bernard in Vancouver, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I must say I couldn't imagine it getting any more exciting. I'll just be very brief because I told your screen I'd mention about the film Vaxxed, and I know you how to spell it, but it's VAXXED. This is a critical film that I'm trying to encourage consumer health groups to try to make arrangements to show it, to get some decent numbers out there, and because they will never admit they're wrong. They said that about fluoridation. Even if we know you're right, we can't possibly ever admit we're wrong because the public will lose faith in us, and then the whole thing collapses, you know. So it's just desperate, but it's all about Dr. Wakefield, as you know. It's about restoring his credibility. They tried to destroy him because he went up against the most sacred of cows in medicine, the vaccine thing. So I appreciate you're on top of it, and which is
amazing because the term vaccination comes from, vaca or vache, the French word for cow.
Right, and actually, this adversely affects African Americans. That I don't want to be sensational, but it reminds me a little of the Tuskegee experiment, where they knew that it was having this effect, but they didn't tell them or do anything about it. So this is like a huge cover-up, and Dr. Thompson, as you pointed out, is a major whistleblower. This is big stuff. This is much bigger than tobacco or all that.
It really is. And in the short term, it's very profitable for the medical industrial complex. Care for the autistic is now running $200 billion a year. But at the current exponential growth rate of autism, by 2030, half of the Americans being born will come down with autism. And at that point, our economy can't even still function. Anyway, listen, Bernard, I'm going to have to cut you off here because we're coming up on the end of the show. And we've got, we have a lot of stuff that we did not get to. We'll try and get to it tomorrow. So anyway, we'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. And I got to tell you, I can't believe that Hillary still thinks she's going to be able to steal that White House, and she's willing to start a civil war in this country to do it. That just can't even tell you how I feel about that. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.